The stagecoach lurched to a stop outside the general store in Montezuma, Colorado, and Victoria Novak pressed one trembling hand against her swollen belly, knowing that her secret would soon destroy whatever fragile hope she had left for a new life in this mountain town. The September air in 1883 was crisp and thin at this elevation, carrying the scent of pine and the distant promise of early snow. Victoria had traveled 3 weeks from Boston, enduring cramped coaches and suspicious stares, all to meet a man named Harold Pemberton, who had advertised for a bride through a matrimonial agency. The letters had been cordial if not warm, promising a stable home and respectful partnership. What those letters had not mentioned was that Harold Pemberton expected a proper, untouched bride, not a woman carrying another man's child. She climbed down from the coach with as much dignity as she could muster, smoothing the folds of her navy traveling dress that she had carefully chosen to hide her condition. At 4 months along, she could still conceal the pregnancy with the right clothing and posture, but not for much longer. The driver handed down her single trunk, and she looked around the dusty main street of Montezuma with a mixture of hope and dread. The town was smaller than she had imagined, nestled in a high valley surrounded by towering peaks already dusted with white. Buildings lined both sides of the rutted street, their false fronts painted in fading colors. She counted a saloon, a blacksmith, the general store, a hotel, and what appeared to be a assay office among the scattered structures. Men in worn work clothes and dusty hats moved between the buildings, most of them miners judging by the dirt under their fingernails and the tired slump of their shoulders. "Miss Novak." A reedy voice cut through her observations, and she turned to see a thin man with spectacles and a severely trimmed mustache approaching. He wore a suit that seemed too formal for this rough mountain town, and his pale eyes swept over her with clinical assessment. "Mr. Pemberton." She forced a smile, extending her gloved hand. He took it briefly, his grip limp and cool. "Indeed, I trust your journey was tolerable." His gaze lingered on her midsection for a moment too long, and Victoria felt her stomach drop. "It was long but manageable, thank you." "Shall we collect your belongings and proceed to my residence? I have arranged for Reverend Walsh to perform the ceremony this evening, as I see no reason for delay." His tone was clipped, businesslike, as if he were discussing a commercial transaction rather than a marriage. Victoria's mouth went dry. This evening, she had hoped for at least a few days to settle in, to find the right moment to confess her situation, perhaps even to gauge whether Harold might be the kind of man who could accept her condition. But looking at his pinched expression, and the way he avoided meeting her eyes directly, she already knew the answer. They walked in silence toward a modest house at the edge of town, Harold's hired man following behind with her trunk. The house was neat but cheerless, painted white with green shutters and a small porch. Inside, the furnishings were sparse and practical, everything arranged with mathematical precision. Harold showed her to a small bedroom that would be hers until the wedding, then excused himself to attend to business matters. Victoria sat on the narrow bed and fought back tears. She had known this would be difficult, but the reality of her situation was crushing. In Boston, she had been courted by Thomas Wright, a charming merchant's son who had promised her the world. She had believed him, had trusted him, had given herself to him completely. When she discovered she was pregnant, Thomas had vanished like morning mist, and his family had denied any knowledge of promises or courtship. Her own family, strict and unforgiving, had given her 2 choices: go to a home for unwed mothers and give up the baby, or leave and never return. She had chosen to leave, using the last of her small savings to contact the matrimonial agency. The arrangement with Harold had seemed like a lifeline, a chance to start fresh where no one knew her past. But she had been naive to think she could build a marriage on deception. The child growing inside her deserved better than that, and so did Harold, regardless of his cold demeanor. That evening, before Reverend Walsh was scheduled to arrive, Victoria found Harold in his study, reviewing ledgers by lamplight. She stood in the doorway, her hands clasped tightly together, and cleared her throat. "Mr. Pemberton, I must speak with you about a matter of great importance." He looked up, his expression already suspicious. "Yes." She stepped into the room, closing the door behind her. "I have not been entirely forthcoming in my correspondence with you, and my conscience will not allow me to proceed without full honesty." His eyes narrowed. "Go on." "I am with child." The words came out steadier than she had expected. "The father is not in my life, and I came west hoping to start anew. I understand if you wish to withdraw your offer of marriage. I will take the next stage out of town and trouble you no further." The silence that followed was deafening. Harold rose slowly from his chair, his face turning an alarming shade of red. "You deceitful woman! You intended to pass off another man's bastard as my own." "No," Victoria said firmly, though her heart was pounding. "I intended to tell you the truth and let you decide. I have done so now. After I have paid for your passage, after I have arranged the ceremony and informed the entire town of my impending nuptials." His voice rose with each word. "You have made me a laughingstock. I apologize for any embarrassment I have caused. As I said, I will leave immediately." "You will indeed." Harold strode to the door and flung it open. "You will leave my house this instant. I will send your trunk to the hotel, and you will depart on tomorrow's stage. I want nothing more to do with you or your shame." Victoria walked past him with her head held high, though inside she was crumbling. She had expected rejection, but the venom in his voice still stung. Outside, the evening air had grown cold, and she wrapped her shawl more tightly around her shoulders as she made her way back toward the main street. The hotel was a two-story structure with a saloon on the ground floor. Music and raucous laughter spilled out into the street, along with the smell of whiskey and tobacco. Victoria hesitated, then squared her shoulders and climbed the steps to the entrance. She had nowhere else to go. The lobby was small and shabby, presided over by a gray-haired woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense expression. "Help you? I need a room for the night, please. My trunk will be delivered shortly." The woman's gaze traveled over Victoria's fine dress and proper demeanor, clearly trying to reconcile her appearance with the fact that she was checking into a hotel alone. "That will be 50 cents. Victoria counted out the coins from her small purse, trying not to think about how little money she had left. Enough for the stage ticket back to Denver, perhaps, but then what? She could not return to Boston. She had no prospects, no references that would not require explanations she could not give. The room was tiny and sparsely furnished, but it was clean. Victoria sat on the bed and finally allowed herself to cry, great racking sobs that shook her whole body. She cried for her lost innocence, for the baby who would be born without a father, for the future that seemed impossibly bleak. She must have eventually fallen asleep, because she woke to morning light streaming through the thin curtains and the sound of activity in the street below. Her trunk had been deposited outside her door during the night, and she washed her face in the basin, trying to erase the evidence of her tears. Downstairs, the saloon area had been transformed into a makeshift dining room, with several tables occupied by boarders eating breakfast. Victoria took a seat in the corner, hoping to go unnoticed, and ordered coffee and biscuits from a tired-looking serving girl. She was picking at her food when she became aware of someone standing beside her table. She looked up to find a tall man with sun-weathered features and eyes the color of a summer storm. He held his hat in his hands, and there was something gentle in his expression that made her throat tighten. "Forgive the intrusion, miss. My name is Fletcher Zimmerman. I heard about your situation, and I wanted to speak with you if you are willing." Victoria felt her face flush with humiliation. Of course, everyone had heard. In a town this small, Harold's rejection would be common knowledge by now. "I am not in need of pity, Mr. Zimmerman." "I am not offering pity." He gestured to the empty chair across from her. "May I?" She nodded, too tired to refuse. He sat down, his large frame making the chair seem small. He appeared to be in his early 30s, with dark hair that needed cutting and a shadow of stubble on his strong jaw. His clothes were work-worn but clean, and his hands bore the calluses of hard labor. "I run a cattle ranch about 5 miles north of town," he began, his voice low and steady. "It is not a large operation, but it provides a decent living. I lost my wife 2 years ago to fever, and I have been managing alone since then." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I heard that Harold Pemberton sent you away because you are expecting a child. I also heard that the child's father is not in the picture." Victoria lifted her chin, bracing for judgment. "That is correct. That child needs a father," Fletcher said simply. "And I need a wife. I am proposing a practical arrangement, Miss Novak. Marriage, a home, and a name for your baby. In return, you would keep house, help with the ranch work as you are able, and be a partner in building a life together." Victoria stared at him, unable to process what she was hearing. "You are offering to marry me, knowing that I am carrying another man's child." "I am." His gray eyes met hers steadily. "I will not lie and say I am in love with you because we are strangers, but I believe in doing what is right, and it is not right for a child to come into this world without a father to protect and provide for them. It is not right for a woman to face that alone when there is a solution available." "Why would you do this?" Victoria's voice came out as barely more than a whisper. "You do not know me. You do not know what kind of person I am. I know that you had the courage to tell Harold the truth when you could have tried to hide it. I know that you came all this way to try to build a better life. That tells me something about your character." He leaned forward slightly. "I am not asking you to decide this instant. The stage does not leave until this afternoon. Think about it. If you decide to accept, meet me at the church at noon. If not, I wish you well wherever you go." He stood, placed his hat back on his head, and walked out of the dining room before she could formulate a response. Victoria sat in stunned silence, her coffee growing cold in front of her. Fletcher Zimmerman's offer was extraordinary and completely unexpected. A practical arrangement, he had called it. A marriage of convenience to give her child legitimacy and provide him with a wife to help run his ranch. It was not the romantic future she had once dreamed of, but it was infinitely better than the alternatives she faced. She spent the rest of the morning in her room, weighing her options. She could take the stage back to Denver and try to find work, though few respectable establishments would hire a pregnant woman with no references. She could attempt to reach California, where perhaps she could lose herself in a larger city, but that would require money she did not have. Or she could accept Fletcher Zimmerman's offer, and at least give her child a stable home and a father's name. The more she thought about it, the more she realized there was really only one choice. Her pride might be wounded by accepting charity from a stranger, but her child's welfare was more important than her pride. Fletcher had seemed kind, and he had been honest about his motivations. That was more than she could say for Thomas, who had claimed to love her while planning his betrayal. At 12:45, Victoria changed into her best dress, a simple green calico that made her eyes look greener. She repacked her trunk, settled her bill with the hotel keeper, and arranged for her belongings to be held until she could send for them. Then she walked slowly toward the small church at the end of the main street. The building was modest, whitewashed wood with a simple cross above the door. Victoria paused outside, her hand resting on her belly where she could just begin to feel the slight swell of her growing child. "I am doing this for you," she whispered, "to give you the best chance I can." She pushed open the door and stepped inside. The interior was cool and dim, with simple wooden pews and sunlight streaming through plain glass windows. Fletcher stood near the altar, talking quietly with a man she assumed was Reverend Walsh. When he heard the door, Fletcher turned, and something that might have been relief crossed his features. He walked toward her, his boots echoing on the wooden floor. "You came." "I did." Victoria met his eyes. "Before we proceed, I need to know your expectations clearly. What exactly are you asking of me in this arrangement?" Fletcher glanced at the Reverend, then gestured toward the door. "Let us speak outside for a moment." They stepped out into the bright September sunshine, and Fletcher led her a short distance from the church before stopping. "I will be honest with you, Miss Novak. I am offering you marriage and a home, but I am not expecting a traditional wedding night. You are carrying a child, and I will not pressure you for intimacy. When you are comfortable, if you ever are, that can change. But for now, this is about practical partnership and giving that baby a name." Victoria felt tears prick her eyes at his consideration. "Thank you for your honesty." "What about the ranch work? I am willing to help, but I do not know much about cattle or farming. I will teach you what you need to know. The house needs a woman's touch, and I could use help with cooking, garden work, and general upkeep. Once the baby comes, that will be your primary responsibility. I have hired men who help with the heavier ranch work." He paused. "I will treat you with respect, Miss Novak, and I will treat your child as my own. That is my promise to you. Then I accept your offer, Mr. Zimmerman. And please call me Victoria." A small smile touched his lips, softening his weathered features. "Fletcher." They returned to the church, where Reverend Walsh performed a brief ceremony. There were no flowers, no music, no guests to witness their union. Just two strangers making practical vows to face an uncertain future together. When Fletcher slipped a simple gold band onto Victoria's finger, she felt the weight of it settle against her skin like both a promise and a question mark. After signing the marriage certificate, Fletcher helped her into a sturdy wagon loaded with supplies from the general store. Her trunk was secured in the back, and then they were rolling out of town, heading north along a rutted track that climbed gradually into the mountains. The landscape was breathtaking, all golden aspens and dark pines against the backdrop of gray peaks. The air smelled of sage and pine sap, and the silence between them was not uncomfortable, just thoughtful. Victoria studied her new husband from the corner of her eye, trying to understand what kind of man would make such a generous offer to a complete stranger. "You said you lost your wife 2 years ago," she ventured after a while. "I am sorry for your loss." Fletcher's hands tightened briefly on the reins. "Thank you. Sarah was a good woman. We had 5 years together before the fever took her. She always wanted children, but it never happened for us." "That must have been difficult." "It was." He was quiet for a moment. "I think she would have liked you. She had a kind heart for people in tough situations. She was always bringing home strays, injured animals, people down on their luck. Drove me crazy sometimes, but it was one of the things I loved about her." Victoria heard the grief still raw in his voice and felt a pang of sympathy. "I will not try to replace her. I am not asking you to." Fletcher glanced at her. "Sarah will always have a place in my heart, but she is gone. I have to keep living, keep moving forward. This arrangement we have made, it is about building something new, not trying to recreate the past. They rode in companionable silence after that, and Victoria found herself relaxing slightly. Fletcher seemed to be a man of his word, straightforward and honest. It was a relief after the deception and betrayal she had experienced with Thomas. The ranch came into view as they crested a small rise. It was situated in a protected valley, with a solid log house, a large barn, several outbuildings and corrals that held a dozen horses and perhaps 50 head of cattle. A creek ran along one edge of the property, lined with willows that were already turning gold. Mountains rose on all sides, creating a sense of peaceful isolation. "It is beautiful," Victoria said, and meant it. Fletcher pulled the wagon up to the house and helped her down. "Let me show you around before we unload your things." The house was larger than Harold's had been, built of thick logs chinked with mud. Fletcher led her inside, and Victoria found herself in a spacious main room with a stone fireplace at one end and a kitchen area at the other. Doors led off to what appeared to be 2 bedrooms and a small storage room. "I sleep in there," Fletcher indicated the larger bedroom. "You can have the other one. It is smaller, but it has a good window and catches the morning sun." He seemed almost nervous, running his hand through his hair. "I have not been keeping house very well on my own. I am afraid it is a bit rough." Victoria looked around at the dusty surfaces, the dishes stacked haphazardly, the general disorder that came from a man living alone without much concern for domestic niceties. "Nothing that cannot be fixed with some work." They spent the rest of the afternoon in practical tasks. Fletcher brought in her trunk and helped her settle into her bedroom, then showed her around the ranch property. He introduced her to his 2 hired hands, Miguel and his son Carlos, who lived in a small cabin near the barn. Both men were courteous and respectful, though she caught the curiosity in their eyes. That evening, Victoria cooked her first meal in her new home. The pantry was adequately stocked with basics, and she managed to put together a simple dinner of salt pork, beans, and cornbread. They ate at the rough wooden table, Fletcher complimenting her cooking with genuine appreciation. "This is the best meal I have had in months," he said, helping himself to more cornbread. "Miguel is a fine ranch hand, but neither of us can cook worth a damn." Victoria smiled despite her exhaustion. "I am glad I can be useful." After dinner, Fletcher insisted on helping with the dishes, and they worked side by side in the lamplight. It felt strange and domestic, and Victoria had to remind herself that this man had been a complete stranger just this morning. Now he was her husband, at least in name. As the evening grew late, Fletcher banked the fire and checked the doors. "You should rest. I know today has been difficult for you." "Fletcher," Victoria said, stopping him before he could retreat to his room. "Thank you for everything. I know this arrangement is unusual, but I am grateful." He looked at her for a long moment, his gray eyes unreadable in the dim light. "We will make it work, Victoria, one day at a time." That first night, Victoria lay in her narrow bed and listened to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch. Coyotes called in the distance, and the wind whispered through the pines. She placed her hand on her belly, feeling the slight curve of her growing child, and whispered a prayer of thanks for this unexpected second chance. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Victoria rose early to make breakfast, then spent her mornings cleaning and organizing the house. It was satisfying work, bringing order to the chaos Fletcher had been living in. She scrubbed floors, washed windows, and aired out bedding. She organized the pantry and made lists of supplies they would need from town. Fletcher and his hired men worked the cattle, mending fences and preparing for the coming winter. He was patient in teaching her about ranch life, explaining the rhythms and requirements of raising livestock in this harsh mountain climate. In the evenings, they would sit together after dinner, sometimes talking, sometimes reading in companionable silence. Victoria found herself watching him when he was not looking, studying the strong lines of his profile, the careful way he moved his large hands when handling delicate tasks, the rare smile that transformed his serious face. He was a good man, she realized. Decent and hardworking and far kinder than he needed to be. 3 weeks into their marriage, Victoria was hanging laundry when a wave of dizziness swept over her. She grabbed the clothesline for support, and the world tilted alarmingly. Strong arms caught her before she could fall, and Fletcher's worried face swam into view. "Easy now, I have got you." He lifted her effortlessly and carried her into the house, setting her gently on the sofa. "When did you last eat?" "This morning. I am fine, just stood up too quickly." Fletcher disappeared into the kitchen and returned with water and some bread and butter. "You need to take better care of yourself. You are eating for two now." Victoria accepted the food, touched by his concern. "I have been feeling well, truly. The morning sickness passed weeks ago." He sat down beside her, his brow furrowed. "I have been meaning to ask, when is the baby due?" "Late February or early March," the doctor thought. Fletcher nodded slowly. "We should have the doctor from town come out to check on you, make sure everything is progressing as it should." "That is not necessary. I feel fine, truly." "Victoria." His voice was gentle but firm. "That baby is going to be my child in every way that matters. I need to know that you are both healthy and cared for, please." Something in Victoria's chest loosened at his words. He really meant it. He truly intended to treat this child as his own. "All right, thank you." As October arrived, bringing the first real snow to the high peaks, Victoria's pregnancy became impossible to hide. Her belly swelled noticeably, and Fletcher began to fuss over her like a mother hen, insisting she rest more and avoid heavy work. He brought in a woman from town, Mrs. Crawford, to help with the heavier household tasks and to serve as a midwife when the time came. Mrs. Crawford was a stout, practical woman in her 50s who had delivered half the babies in the county. She examined Victoria thoroughly and pronounced both mother and baby healthy and strong. "You are a lucky woman, Mrs. Zimmerman," she said as she packed up her bag. "Not many men would take on another's child so willingly. Your husband is a good man." "I know," Victoria said softly, and realized with a start that it was completely true. The first major snowfall came in mid-November, blanketing the ranch in white and reducing the world to their small valley. Fletcher brought the cattle down to lower pastures and stocked the house with firewood and supplies for the long winter ahead. They were effectively snowed in, isolated from town until the spring thaw, or at least a break in the weather. Victoria found that she did not mind the isolation. The ranch felt cozy and safe, and her relationship with Fletcher was deepening into genuine friendship. They talked for hours in the evenings, sharing stories of their childhoods, their dreams, their regrets. Fletcher told her about growing up on a farm in Missouri, learning ranching from his father, coming west to build something of his own. Victoria spoke carefully about her life in Boston, omitting the painful details of Thomas's betrayal, but sharing her love of reading, her closeness with her younger sister, her dreams of adventure. One snowy evening in early December, Victoria was sitting by the fire working on sewing baby clothes when Fletcher suddenly spoke from his chair across from her. "I have been thinking about names. For the baby." Victoria looked up in surprise. "Oh. If it is a boy, I was wondering if you would like to name him after someone in your family." "Your father, perhaps?" Victoria's throat tightened. Her father had disowned her when she left. "No, I think we should choose a new name, a fresh start." Fletcher nodded. "What about Sarah if it is a girl?" To honor my late wife, Victoria set down her sewing, considering. It was a generous gesture, showing that he trusted her enough to share that part of his past. I think Sarah is a lovely name, but perhaps for a middle name, I would like to choose the first name together. A smile crossed Fletcher's face. I would like that. They spent the rest of the evening discussing names, debating the merits of various options and laughing at some of the more outlandish suggestions. It felt intimate and domestic, and right in a way that made Victoria's heart ache with unexpected emotion. Later, lying in bed, Victoria acknowledged to herself what she had been trying to deny for weeks. She was falling in love with her husband. This man who had married her out of duty and kindness had somehow become the center of her world. She loved the way he sang off-key while doing chores, the gentleness he showed when handling newborn calves, the patience he demonstrated in teaching her about ranch life. She loved the sound of his laugh, the warmth in his eyes when he looked at her growing belly, the careful way he made sure she was comfortable and cared for. But Fletcher had been clear that their marriage was a practical arrangement. He had loved his first wife deeply, and Victoria was not sure if there was room in his heart for her. She would have to be content with friendship and partnership, even if her own feelings ran deeper. Christmas approached, and Fletcher surprised her by cutting down a small pine tree and setting it up in the main room. "Sarah and I always had a tree," he explained, a touch of sadness in his voice. "I know it is just the two of us, but it seemed important to continue the tradition. Especially with the baby coming." Victoria was charmed by his thoughtfulness. They spent an evening making simple decorations from paper and ribbon, stringing popcorn, and creating a warm, festive atmosphere. On Christmas morning, Fletcher presented her with a beautifully carved wooden cradle. "I have been working on it in the barn," he said, looking almost shy. "I wanted to have it ready before the baby comes." Victoria ran her hands over the smooth wood, tears streaming down her face. "It is perfect. Thank you, Fletcher." He stepped closer, awkwardly patting her shoulder. "Do not cry. I thought it would make you happy." "I am happy." She looked up at him through her tears. "I am happier than I have been in a very long time. You have given me so much, Fletcher. A home, security, kindness. I do not know how to repay you. You do not need to repay me." His voice was gruff with emotion. "This is what marriage should be, partners helping each other." She gave him her gift then, a new shirt she had sewn from fabric she had found in the storage room. It was not much, but she had worked hard to make the stitches neat and even. Fletcher seemed genuinely pleased, holding it up to admire her handiwork. They spent a quiet, peaceful Christmas day together, cooking a special meal and sitting by the fire. As evening fell, Fletcher cleared his throat. "I have been thinking about when the baby comes. I want to adopt them legally, give them my name properly. Would that be acceptable to you?" Victoria felt her heart swell. "More than acceptable. I would be honored." The winter deepened, and Victoria grew larger and more uncomfortable. Fletcher became increasingly attentive, helping her with tasks that had become difficult, making sure she rested, even reading aloud to her in the evenings when she was too tired to hold a book herself. His consideration never felt like pity, just genuine care and concern. One evening in late January, as they sat by the fire after dinner, Fletcher suddenly set down his coffee cup and turned to her. "Victoria, I need to tell you something." His serious tone made her nervous. "What is it?" He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she had come to recognize as a sign of discomfort. "When I offered to marry you, I told you it was a practical arrangement. That was true. But over these past months, things have changed. For me, at least." He paused, seeming to struggle for words. "You have become important to me, more than just a wife in name. I look forward to seeing you every morning. I enjoy our conversations, our shared meals, the life we are building together. I think what I am trying to say is that I have developed real feelings for you. Deep feelings." Victoria's breath caught. "Fletcher." He held up a hand. "Let me finish. I know you may not feel the same way. You married me out of necessity, and I do not want you to feel obligated to pretend affection you do not feel, but I wanted you to know the truth. I have come to care for you very much, Victoria. I think I might be falling in love with you." Victoria felt tears streaming down her face again, but this time they were tears of pure joy. "Oh, Fletcher, I have been falling in love with you for months. I was afraid to say anything because I thought you only saw me as a responsibility, a duty you had taken on." His eyes widened. "Are you serious?" She laughed through her tears. "Completely serious. You are a good man, Fletcher Zimmerman, the best man I have ever known. I love your kindness, your integrity, your patience. I love the way you sing off-key and the way you talk to the horses. I love how seriously you take your responsibilities and how gently you treat me. I love you." Fletcher crossed the distance between them in 2 strides, kneeling beside her chair and taking her hands in his. "Victoria Zimmerman, I love you, not just as a convenience or a partnership, but truly and deeply. You have brought light back into my life. You have given me hope and purpose and joy." He leaned forward, and she met him halfway in a kiss that was tender and sweet and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, they were both smiling. "I have wanted to do that for weeks," Fletcher admitted. "Then why did you not?" "I did not want to presume. I did not want you to feel pressured." Victoria touched his face gently. "You could never pressure me, Fletcher. You are too considerate for that." They stayed up late that night, talking about their feelings, making plans for the future, rediscovering each other in this new light. Fletcher moved to the sofa to hold her, careful of her pregnant belly, and they kissed and talked and laughed until the fire burned down to embers. The next morning, Fletcher helped her move her belongings into his larger bedroom. "Our bedroom now," he said, kissing her forehead. "If you are comfortable with that." "More than comfortable," Victoria assured him. The baby came in late February during a howling snowstorm that cut them off completely from town. Mrs. Crawford had come to stay a week earlier, sensing that the birth was imminent. Fletcher paced the main room while Victoria labored in the bedroom, attended by Mrs. Crawford's experienced hands. The labor was long and difficult, and more than once Fletcher tried to burst into the room, only to be firmly turned away by Mrs. Crawford. Finally, after nearly 20 hours, the thin wail of a newborn pierced the air. Fletcher burst through the door this time, ignoring Mrs. Crawford's protests. Victoria lay exhausted on the bed, her hair plastered to her forehead with sweat, and in her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in a clean blanket. "It is a boy," she whispered, smiling up at him. "A healthy baby boy." Fletcher approached slowly, all written on his face. He sat carefully on the edge of the bed, looking down at the red-faced infant. "He is perfect. You are amazing. How are you feeling?" "Tired, but happy." Victoria held the baby out to him. "Do you want to hold your son?" Fletcher's hands shook as he took the infant, cradling him with infinite care. The baby opened his eyes, unfocused and dark, and Fletcher felt his heart expand with a love so fierce it took his breath away. "What should we call him?" Victoria asked. They had discussed names endlessly, but now, looking at this tiny new person, Fletcher knew exactly what felt right. "What about Daniel? It means God is my judge. It seems fitting given how we came together." Victoria smiled. "Daniel Fletcher Zimmerman, I love it." Mrs. Crawford bustled around, cleaning up and checking on both mother and baby. She pronounced them both healthy and gave Fletcher stern instructions about letting Victoria rest and recover. The weeks that followed were exhausting and wonderful. Daniel was a hungry baby who woke frequently at night, and Victoria was sore and tired from the birth. But Fletcher was there every step of the way, changing diapers, walking the floor with a crying infant, fetching water and food for Victoria, doing whatever was needed. One night, Victoria woke to find Fletcher's side of the bed empty. She heard soft singing coming from the main room and got up carefully to investigate. Fletcher was walking slowly around the room with Daniel in his arms, singing a lullaby in his terrible off-key voice. The tenderness in his expression as he looked down at the baby made Victoria's eyes well with tears. "I thought I could handle him so you could sleep," Fletcher said when he noticed her in the doorway. "You are going to spoil him. Good. He deserves to be spoiled." Fletcher smiled at her. "Go back to bed, love. I have got him." Victoria returned to bed, her heart full. This was not the life she had planned when she left Boston. It was better. It was real and solid and built on honesty and love. As spring came to the mountains, bringing snowmelt and wildflowers, Victoria regained her strength. She and Fletcher settled into their new roles as parents, learning together how to care for their son. Daniel grew rapidly, becoming a chubby, happy baby who smiled readily and rarely cried. One warm May afternoon, Victoria was working in her new garden while Daniel slept in a basket nearby. Fletcher rode in from checking the upper pastures and dismounted, walking over to look at her neat rows of vegetables. "It is coming along nicely. I think we will have a good harvest this year." Victoria stood, brushing dirt from her hands. "How are the cattle? Healthy. We should have a good calf crop." He pulled her into his arms, kissing her thoroughly. "Have I told you today that I love you?" "Not in the last hour," she teased. "I love you, Victoria Zimmerman. You and our son are the best things that ever happened to me. Even better than your first wife." The question slipped out before Victoria could stop it, and she immediately regretted it, but Fletcher did not look offended. "Sarah was my first love, and I will always care for her memory. But you are my second chance at happiness, Victoria. You are my partner, my love, my future. Sarah would want me to be happy to move forward, and I am. With you." Victoria kissed him, pouring all her love and gratitude into the gesture. When they pulled apart, Daniel had woken and was making hungry noises. Fletcher scooped him up, making silly faces that made the baby chortle. "Your daddy is ridiculous," Victoria informed her son, laughing. "Your mommy is beautiful," Fletcher countered, tossing Daniel gently in the air, much to the baby's delight. As the summer progressed, the ranch prospered. Fletcher's hard work and careful management paid off with healthy cattle and good prices at market. He hired another hand, a young man named Peter, to help with the increased workload. Victoria's garden flourished, providing fresh vegetables and herbs, and she began putting up preserves for the winter. In August, Victoria's sister Elizabeth sent a letter, the first communication from her family since she had left Boston. Elizabeth wrote that their parents were ill, that she missed Victoria terribly, and that she hoped her sister had found happiness out west. She asked tentatively if Victoria might want to reconcile. Victoria sat with the letter for a long time, unsure how to respond. Fletcher found her on the porch, watching the sunset with a troubled expression. "What is wrong?" She handed him the letter, and he read it carefully. "What do you want to do?" "I do not know. Part of me wants to tell them about you and Daniel, to show them that I am happy and doing well. But another part of me is still so hurt by how they treated me." Fletcher sat beside her, taking her hand. "You do not owe them anything, Victoria. But if you want to reach out to try to build a bridge, I will support you. And if you want to leave it alone, I will support that too." Victoria leaned her head on his shoulder. "What would you do?" "I think I would write back to your sister. Not to your parents necessarily, but to Elizabeth." Family is important, and if she is reaching out, it might be worth seeing if that relationship can be mended. Victoria considered this, then nodded. You are right. I will write to her. Tell her about my life here, about you and Daniel. Let her decide if she wants to continue the correspondence. She wrote the letter that evening, describing the ranch, her marriage to Fletcher, and the birth of Daniel. She was honest about how they had met, but also clear about how happy she was now. She sent the letter off with mixed feelings, unsure what response it might bring. Life continued its steady rhythm through the fall. Daniel began to crawl, getting into everything and keeping both his parents on their toes. Fletcher taught Victoria to ride properly, and they would sometimes take family excursions around the ranch, Daniel secure in a sling against Fletcher's chest. In October, a response came from Elizabeth. Her letter was warm and loving, expressing joy at Victoria's happiness and asking if she might come to visit the following summer. She wrote that their parents were still stiff and disapproving, but that Elizabeth herself was done letting them dictate her relationships. Victoria cried as she read the letter, and Fletcher held her while she worked through her complicated emotions. I am glad, she finally said. I have missed her so much. Then invite her to come. We have room, and I would like to meet this sister who means so much to you. As their first anniversary approached, Fletcher surprised Victoria with a beautiful necklace, a delicate gold chain with a small pendant. I wanted to give you something special, to mark this year we have had together. Victoria was touched, fastening it around her neck. It is beautiful, Fletcher. But you did not need to get me anything. This past year has been gift enough. This year has changed my life, Fletcher said seriously. A year ago I was alone and lonely, just going through the motions. You brought joy back into my life, Victoria. You gave me a family, a purpose, a future to look forward to. I wanted you to have something to remember that. Victoria pulled him close, kissing him deeply. I could never forget. Every day with you is a blessing. They celebrated their anniversary with a quiet dinner after Daniel was asleep, talking about the year that had passed and making plans for the years ahead. They talked about expanding the ranch, maybe having more children, building a future together in this beautiful mountain valley. Winter came again, but this time Victoria was prepared for it. The house was well stocked, Daniel was healthy and growing, and she had Fletcher by her side. They spent cozy evenings as a family, Fletcher reading aloud while Victoria sewed and Daniel played on a blanket at their feet. In February, on Daniel's first birthday, they had a small celebration. Mrs. Crawford came out from town, along with Miguel and Carlos and their families. Victoria baked a cake, and they all sang while Daniel smashed his chubby hands into it, getting frosting everywhere and laughing with delight. He is going to be a handful, Mrs. Crawford predicted, watching the happy baby with a smile. He already is, Fletcher said proudly, swooping in to clean Daniel's messy face. That night, after everyone had gone and Daniel was asleep, Fletcher and Victoria sat by the fire. Fletcher pulled her close, his hand resting on her stomach. I have been thinking, he said quietly, about having another baby. I know Daniel is still young, but I would love to have more children with you, to grow our family. Victoria smiled, placing her hand over his. I have been thinking the same thing. I love being a mother and I love seeing you as a father. I think Daniel would love a little brother or sister. So we will try. For another baby. Yes, Victoria said, kissing him. Let us try. Spring arrived with its usual burst of life and color. The creek swelled with snowmelt, the aspens leafed out in brilliant green, and wildflowers carpeted the meadows. Victoria worked in her expanded garden while Daniel toddled around, investigating everything with endless curiosity. In June, Elizabeth arrived for her promised visit. Victoria was nervous about seeing her sister after so long, but the moment Elizabeth stepped off the stage in Montezuma, all awkwardness vanished. They embraced tearfully, holding each other tight. "You look wonderful," Elizabeth said, studying her sister's glowing face. "Happy and healthy." "I am so glad." Fletcher had come to town with Victoria, and she introduced him proudly. "Elizabeth, this is my husband, Fletcher." Elizabeth shook his hand warmly. "Thank you for taking such good care of my sister, Mr. Zimmerman. Your letters have brought her so much joy this past year." "Please, call me Fletcher, and she has brought me just as much joy, I assure you." They loaded Elizabeth's trunk into the wagon, and Daniel charmed his aunt immediately with his sunny personality and ready smiles. The ride back to the ranch was filled with conversation and laughter, Elizabeth asking eager questions about their life and exclaiming over the beautiful scenery. Elizabeth's visit lasted 3 weeks, and they were wonderful weeks. Victoria loved showing her sister her home, introducing her to the animals, teaching her about ranch life. Elizabeth and Fletcher got along well, and she was clearly thrilled to see how happy Victoria was. One evening, after Daniel was in bed, the three of them sat on the porch watching the sunset. Elizabeth turned to Victoria with tears in her eyes. "I am so sorry for how Mother and Father treated you. You deserved better than that." Victoria squeezed her hand. "I have forgiven them. What happened brought me here to this life, and I would not change that for anything. Still, it was wrong, but I am glad something good came from it." Elizabeth looked at Fletcher. "Thank you for seeing my sister's worth when others could not." "I am the lucky one," Fletcher said simply, taking Victoria's hand. When it was time for Elizabeth to leave, there were more tears, but happy ones. She promised to write regularly and to visit again the following year. As they watched the stage carry her away, Victoria leaned against Fletcher's shoulder. "That went well." "It did. I like your sister. She is welcome here anytime." The summer passed in hard work and happiness. Victoria's garden produced abundantly, and she spent long hours preserving food for the winter. Fletcher and his men worked from dawn to dusk with the cattle and horses, preparing for the fall roundup. Daniel grew and developed, learning new words every day and getting into everything. In August, Victoria realized she had missed her monthly courses. She waited another month to be sure, then shared the news with Fletcher one evening after dinner. "I think I am pregnant again." Fletcher's face lit up with joy. He pulled her into his arms carefully. "That is wonderful. When?" "Probably early spring, I think. March or April. Daniel will be a big brother. Do you think he will be ready for that?" Victoria laughed. "I suppose we will find out. How do you feel about it?" "Overjoyed, blessed, lucky." Fletcher kissed her forehead. "I love our family, Victoria. I love the life we have built together." "So do I, more than I ever imagined possible." The pregnancy progressed normally, though Victoria was more tired this time, chasing after an active toddler while her belly grew. Fletcher was even more protective than he had been with Daniel, constantly worrying about her doing too much. Mrs. Crawford came out periodically to check on her and pronounced both mother and baby healthy. The winter was harsh that year, with heavy snows that isolated them for weeks at a time. But the house was warm and well supplied, and Victoria actually enjoyed the enforced family time. They played games with Daniel, read books together, and dreamed about the future. In late March, Victoria went into labor during a clear, cold night. This time the process was faster, and by dawn she had delivered a healthy baby girl. Fletcher was there for the birth, holding her hand and wiping her forehead, and when their daughter finally arrived, he cried openly at the sight of her. "She is perfect," he whispered, holding the tiny infant with practiced ease now. "Look at her little fingers. She is so small." "What should we call her?" Victoria asked, exhausted but happy. Fletcher looked at the baby thoughtfully. What about Emma Sarah? Emma for a new beginning and Sarah to honor my first wife like we discussed before, Victoria smiled. Emma Sarah Zimmerman. It is perfect. Daniel was fascinated by his baby sister, constantly wanting to touch her and help with her care. Fletcher was patient in teaching his son how to be gentle, how to help feed Emma, how to be a good big brother. The months that followed were exhausting but joyful. Managing two small children was challenging, but Victoria and Fletcher worked together as a team. Fletcher helped with the children whenever he was not working, getting up with Emma at night so Victoria could rest, entertaining Daniel when she was too tired to keep up with his energy. One evening in May, Fletcher found Victoria on the porch, holding Emma while Daniel played in the yard with his toy horses. He sat beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "You look tired." "I am tired," she admitted, "but I am also happy, completely, thoroughly happy." "We have come a long way from that day in the hotel dining room," Fletcher said softly. "We have." Victoria leaned her head on his shoulder. "Do you ever regret it, taking on a pregnant woman you did not know?" "Never, not for a single moment." Fletcher kissed the top of her head. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Victoria. You and our children. I thank God every day that Harold Pemberton was too stupid to see what he was turning away." Victoria laughed. "I should probably write him a thank you letter." "Please do not. The man is an idiot, and I do not want him getting any ideas about what he missed out on." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the mountains, their children safe and happy around them. Victoria thought about the frightened woman she had been 3 years ago, pregnant and alone, facing an uncertain future. She thought about the desperate choice that had brought her to Montezuma and the unexpected kindness of a stranger who had become the love of her life. "Fletcher," she said softly, "do you remember what you said to me that first day, when you offered to marry me?" "I said a lot of things that day." "You said that child needs a father, and you were right. Daniel needed a father, and you have been the best father he could possibly have. But I needed someone too. I needed a partner, a friend, someone to believe in me when I had stopped believing in myself. You have been all of that and more." Fletcher turned to face her, his gray eyes shining with emotion. "And you have given me back my life, Victoria. After Sarah died, I was just existing, not really living. You reminded me what it means to have a family, to have love, to have a purpose beyond just working and surviving. We saved each other, I think." "We did," Victoria agreed, kissing him softly. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and celebrations. Daniel started school in town, riding down with Fletcher when he went for supplies. Emma grew from a baby into a curious toddler, and then a bright little girl who followed her brother everywhere. The ranch prospered, expanding gradually as Fletcher's reputation for quality cattle spread. Elizabeth visited every summer, and over time, even Victoria's parents began sending occasional letters, stiff and formal at first but gradually warming. They never fully acknowledged their earlier rejection, but Victoria found she could forgive them now, secure in the life she had built. When Daniel was 6 and Emma was 3, Victoria gave birth to another son, James. Fletcher cried again, holding his second son with the same wonder he had shown with each of their children. "I never thought I would have this," he said to Victoria as she rested after the birth. "A house full of children, love, laughter. You have given me everything I ever wanted, and things I did not even know I needed." The children grew, each with their own personality. Daniel was serious and responsible, interested in the ranch work and shadowing his father constantly. Emma was spirited and adventurous, always climbing trees and exploring places she should not go. James was sweet-natured and gentle, preferring to help his mother in the garden rather than work with the cattle. One autumn evening when Daniel was 10, Emma 7, and James 4, the whole family sat around the dinner table. The conversation was lively, everyone talking over each other, sharing stories from their day. Fletcher looked around at his family, his heart full to bursting. After the children were in bed, he found Victoria in their bedroom, brushing out her hair. He came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and meeting her eyes in the mirror. "You remember what you said to me years ago about how you fell in love with me?" Victoria smiled. "I said a lot of things. Which part?" "You said you loved how seriously I took my responsibilities. But Victoria, you and the children are not responsibilities to me. You are my joy, my reason for being. I want you to know that." Victoria turned in his arms, touching his face gently. Gray was starting to show at his temples, and fine lines crinkled around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun. She loved every sign of their shared life together. "I know, Fletcher. And you are mine. You took a frightened, pregnant woman and gave her a home, a family, a future. You loved a child that was not yours as if he were your own blood. You built a life with me based on honesty and partnership and love. I could not have asked for a better husband or father for my children." "Our children," Fletcher corrected gently. "Daniel is as much mine as Emma and James." "Blood does not make a family. Love does." They stood together in the lamplight, holding each other close, grateful for the unexpected path that had brought them together. Outside, the Colorado night was cold and clear, stars brilliant in the dark sky. But inside, their home was warm with love and laughter, filled with the family they had built together. The years continued to unfold in their mountain valley. Daniel grew into a fine young man, taking on more responsibility at the ranch and showing the same steady character as his father. Emma remained a firecracker, eventually channeling her adventurous spirit into training horses with surprising skill. James proved to have a gift for growing things, expanding Victoria's garden into a small market operation that supplied the town. When Victoria turned 40, Fletcher threw a surprise party, inviting half the town to celebrate. As she looked around at the crowd of friends and neighbors, at her grown and growing children, at her husband who still looked at her with love in his eyes, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. "Speech," someone called, and the room fell quiet. Victoria stood, slightly flustered. "I am not sure what to say. 20 years ago I arrived in Montezuma with nothing but a trunk and a secret, running from my mistakes and hoping for a second chance. Fletcher gave me that chance. He gave me a home, a family, a life I could never have imagined. So I guess what I want to say is thank you to Fletcher for seeing something worth saving in a desperate woman at a hotel dining room. To my children for filling my life with joy and purpose. And to all of you for welcoming me into this community and making it home." There was not a dry eye in the room as people applauded. Fletcher came to her side, taking her hand and kissing it. "I am the one who should be thanking you," he said quietly. "Every day with you is a gift." As the party continued around them, Victoria watched Daniel dancing with a pretty girl from town, Emma demonstrating rope tricks to an admiring crowd, and James helping serve cake to the younger children. This was her legacy, she thought. Not just her biological children, but the family she had built through love and commitment and daily choice. Fletcher pulled her onto the makeshift dance floor, and they swayed together to the music. She rested her head on his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of him, feeling the strength of his arms around her. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how grateful I am. About how lucky I was that Harold Pemberton sent me away. About how different my life might have been if you had not walked into that dining room and offered me hope." "I was the lucky one," Fletcher insisted. I got a beautiful wife, wonderful children, and a second chance at happiness, all because I followed my conscience that day." "Your conscience and your heart." "Maybe both," Fletcher agreed, spinning her gently, "but I would do it again in a heartbeat, 100 times over." The music played on, and they danced together in the lamplight, surrounded by the life they had built. Outside, the mountains stood eternal and unchanging, guardians of the valley where two lost souls had found each other and created something beautiful. Years later, when they were old and gray, sitting on their porch watching grandchildren play in the yard, Victoria would often think back to that day in 1883 when she stepped off the stage in Montezuma, pregnant and alone and terrified. She would think about Fletcher's simple statement that changed everything: "That child needs a father." He had been right, but what he had given her went far beyond that simple need. He had given her love, partnership, respect, and a family that spanned generations. "What are you smiling about?" Fletcher would ask, his voice rougher with age but still warm. "Just remembering," she would say, taking his weathered hand in hers. "Just grateful." "Me too," he would reply, squeezing her fingers gently. "Every single day." And in those moments, sitting together watching their legacy unfold before them, Victoria would know with absolute certainty that the long journey from Boston, the fear and uncertainty, the desperate gamble that brought her to this mountain town, all of it had been worth it. She had found her home, her love, her happily ever after in the most unexpected place, with the most unexpected person. Their love story was not the traditional romance of grand gestures and passionate declarations. It was quieter than that, built on daily kindnesses, shared work, mutual respect, and the conscious choice to love each other through good times and hard. It was the story of two people who found each other when they needed it most, who built something beautiful from desperate circumstances, who proved that sometimes the best love stories are the ones that begin with the simplest act of human decency. As the sun set over the mountains on countless evenings, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Fletcher and Victoria would sit together in the home they had made, surrounded by the family they had built, grateful for the unexpected path that brought them together. Their story would be told to their children and grandchildren, a testament to the power of kindness, the strength of commitment, and the enduring nature of love that grows slowly, steadily, deeply over time. The child that needed a father got one, the best father he could have asked for. And the woman who thought she had lost everything found that she had gained the world. In the end, that was all that mattered. They had found each other, saved each other, loved each other, and built a life together that neither could have imagined in those early uncertain days. The Wild West could be harsh and unforgiving, but it also offered second chances to those brave enough to take them. Victoria and Fletcher had seized their second chance with both hands and created something beautiful, lasting, and true. Their love story, born from necessity and grown into something profound, would endure as long as the mountains that watched over their valley. A reminder that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places, offered by the most unexpected people, at exactly the moment when you need them most.